There are two things I know for certain about getting older. Your body starts keeping score of every hard year you ever lived, and the people you love most are capable of surprising you in ways you never saw coming, for better and for worse. I was 67 years old when the worst and the best thing that ever happened to me occurred in the same 2-week stretch of September. I was living alone in the house my late husband Raymond and I had built together in Clarksville, Tennessee, 3 bedrooms, a wraparound porch, a pecan tree in the backyard that Raymond planted the year our daughter was born. It was a good house, a full house once. By that September, it was just me, my coffee maker, and the sound of the evening news filling the rooms at night. My daughter Sandra called on a Tuesday. She had that particular brightness in her voice that I had learned, over 67 years, to be cautious about. Sandra was 41 years old, and she had learned early in life that sweetness was a tool, not a feeling. I do not say that to be cruel. I say it because it is true, and because this story requires you to understand what kind of woman she had become. "Mama," she said, "Derek and I have a work conference in Seattle. 2 weeks. We were hoping you could take Lily." I was quiet for a moment. 2 weeks is a long time, Sandra. I know. But she loves being with you, and you know how she gets in hotels, all that stimulation. Lily was 9 years old. She had been diagnosed, at age 4, with something Sandra and her husband Derek called a global developmental delay. The doctors had used softer language processing differences, atypical development, learning challenges. Sandra had taken those careful words and built a wall with them. Lily couldn't learn. Lily didn't understand things the way other children did. Lily needed to be kept calm, kept quiet, kept away from school and other children because the overstimulation was too much for her. I had never fully believed it. Not because I doubted that Lily was different. She was. She moved through the world at her own pace, watched everything with those large, dark eyes that missed nothing, and communicated mostly in gestures and single words around her parents. But when Lily looked at me, really looked at me, there was a depth there that did not match the picture Sandra had painted of her. I had mentioned this once, carefully, and Sandra had cried and told me I was being dismissive of her child's diagnosis. I had not mentioned it again. I told Sandra I would take Lily. They arrived on a Friday evening. Sandra hugged me at the door with one arm, her other hand occupied with her phone. Derek carried Lily's bag inside without making eye contact and set it down in the hallway like he was dropping off a package. Lily stood beside me on the porch and watched her parents' car pull out of the driveway. She watched it until it turned the corner and disappeared. Then she turned and looked up at me with those quiet eyes, and she put her small hand in mine. "Well," I said, "it's just us, then." She nodded. I had prepared the guest room for her, the one with the yellow curtains that she had once told me, in her limited way, that she liked. I had stocked the kitchen with the food Sandra said she would eat. Plain crackers, apple juice, soft bread, the specific brand of chamomile tea that Lily supposedly drank every night to help her sleep. Sandra had been very particular about the tea. She had packed 6 tea bags in a small Ziploc bag and placed them in the front pocket of Lily's backpack with a sticky note. 1 bag, every night, steep 5 minutes, let it cool. She needs it to sleep, or she'll be up all night. Do not skip. I remember reading that note twice. We ate dinner together quietly. I had made chicken and rice simple, easy, and Lily ate every bite on her plate and then looked at me as if asking whether it was all right to want more. I gave her more. She cleaned that plate too. I noticed then how thin she was, not the natural thin of a small child, but the particular thin of a child who has been hungry more than she should have been. After dinner, I washed the dishes, and Lily sat at the kitchen table. I assumed she was doing nothing, just sitting, the way Sandra had described she often did. When I turned around, I saw that she had taken a notepad from the counter, the one I kept for grocery lists, and she was writing. Not scribbling, writing. Careful, deliberate letters. I dried my hands slowly. I walked to the table and looked over her shoulder. She had written, "Do not make the tea." I stood very still. Then I sat down across from her. "Lily," I said carefully, "can you tell me why?" She looked at me for a long time. I could see something working behind her eyes, a calculation, a fear, a decision being made. She picked up the pen again. "It makes you sleep too much. Mom put something in it." I felt the floor shift beneath me, the way it does when your brain receives information it is not prepared to hold. Something, I repeated. What kind of something? She pointed toward the backpack. Then she stood, went to it, and unzipped the front pocket. She didn't take out the tea bags. She reached deeper, into a hidden inside pocket that I had not noticed, and she removed a small photograph. She had taken it herself, on a tablet she apparently kept hidden under her mattress at home. The photo showed a small amber bottle of pills, partially hidden behind a stack of towels in a bathroom cabinet. The label was turned slightly away from the camera, but I could make out a partial word, azepam. I knew enough to know that was not a word that belonged in a child's chamomile tea. My hands were steady. I am not sure how. I set the photograph down on the table between us, and I looked at my granddaughter, this child who had been dressed in silence for years, handed to doctors and labeled and managed and kept small, and I understood that she had been protecting herself the only way she knew how, by watching, by waiting, by being so quiet that no one thought to worry about what she was learning. "How long have you known?" I asked her. She held up all 10 fingers, then 5 more, 15 months. I thought about everything that meant. A 9-year-old child, carrying this alone for 15 months. "Why didn't you tell someone?" I asked. I was not accusing her, I wanted to understand. She wrote on the notepad again. She said if I talked they would take me away and put me somewhere worse. She showed me pictures. I closed my eyes for just a moment. Then I opened them, because Lily needed me to be present. "You talk to me," I said. She looked down at the table. Then she looked back up. "You're different," she wrote. "You look at me like I'm real." I reached across the table and held both her hands, and I told her the truest thing I knew. "You are the most real person in this house." I did not make the tea that night. I put the Ziploc bag of tea bags in a clean plastic sandwich bag and sealed it and labeled it with a piece of tape and a marker. September 7, from Lily's backpack. I put it in the back of the highest shelf in my pantry, behind the canned tomatoes. Then I took the photograph Lily had given me and I put it inside the Ziploc with the tea bags. I did not sleep well. I lay in bed and I thought about what I knew and what I did not know and what I needed to do next. I was not going to call Sandra. I was not going to call Derek. I was not going to call anyone in that house or adjacent to it until I had something in my hands that could not be argued away. In the morning, I called my doctor's office before Lily was awake. I had been a patient of Dr. Harmon's for 11 years. She is a careful woman, not given to drama. I told her I needed to see her that day and that it was important. She fit me in at noon. Before I left, I sat with Lily at the kitchen table again. I told her what I was going to do. I told her I was going to the doctor, and that I needed her to trust me, and that nothing bad was going to happen to her while I was in charge of her. I told her that what she had done saving that photograph, waiting for the right moment, telling me was one of the bravest things I had ever seen a person do. She looked at me steadily. Then she picked up the pen. "Will you come back?" "Lily," I said, "I will always come back for you." I took her with me to the doctor. I was not leaving her alone. I sat in Dr. Harmon's office, and I placed the sealed bag on her desk, and I explained what my granddaughter had told me. I explained about the tea, about the pills, about the 15 months of silence. Dr. Harmon listened without interrupting, which is one of the things I have always appreciated about her. When I finished, she looked at the bag, and then she looked at Lily, who was sitting quietly in the chair beside me, feet not quite reaching the floor. "I want to run a panel on you," she said to me. "Blood work, full talk screen." "That's why I'm here," I said. She looked at Lily again, more gently. "And I want to have one of my colleagues speak with Lily, if that's okay. A pediatrician. No pressure, no labels, just a conversation." I looked at Lily. She was watching Dr. Harmon with those careful eyes. Then she nodded once. Dr. Harmon took the tea bag sample and placed it into a sterile evidence bag from her supply cabinet. She wrote the date and my name on it. She told me she was going to have it sent to the lab along with my blood work and that I should hear back within a week. She also handed me a card. "This is a family law attorney I trust. Call her today. Not tomorrow, today." I called the attorney, whose name was Patricia, from the parking lot while Lily ate a granola bar I had packed in my purse. I explained the situation in as few words as possible. Patricia asked me 3 questions. Did I have physical evidence? Did I have a witness? Was the child currently in my care and out of harm's way? I said yes to all 3. She told me to come in the following morning at 9. I want to be honest with you about the days that followed, because they were not simple. They were not a straight line from fear to resolution. There were nights I lay awake and wondered if I was wrong, if I was misunderstanding something, if a grandmother's intuition was enough to blow up a family over. There were moments when I looked at Lily sitting across from me at breakfast, drawing careful pictures in my notepad, and felt a grief so heavy I could not name it for the years she had lost, for the silence that had been built around her like a cage, for my own failure to push harder, to ask more questions, to trust the thing I had always sensed in her eyes. But then Lily would look up at me and smile. Just a little, she had a small, private smile that I do not think many people had ever been allowed to see, and I would remember what mattered. During those 2 weeks, I learned who my granddaughter actually was. She was not delayed. She was not slow. She was a child who had taught herself to read from the closed captioning on the television in her room, because no one had enrolled her in school and books were not provided. She had a vocabulary that surprised me daily, precise and well-chosen, the vocabulary of someone who had spent years absorbing language without being allowed to produce it. She had a logical mind that I recognized. It reminded me of Raymond, actually, the way he could look at a problem from 3 angles before anyone else had seen the first angle. She had been so afraid, for so long, that the fear had become her only language. What her mother had built was not a diagnosis. It was a prison, and the currency that kept it running, I learned gradually from the notes Lily wrote me and from what Patricia the attorney later uncovered, was money. Government disability payments for a child with documented developmental delays, insurance reimbursements for therapies that were never actually provided. And underneath all of it, a longer plan that Lily had pieced together from overheard phone calls and half-closed doors. My house, my retirement account, the life insurance policy Raymond had left me. Sandra and Derek had been building a case, slowly and carefully, that I was deteriorating, that I could not manage my own affairs, that I needed to sign over power of attorney. The tea was part of that. Patricia filed for an emergency protective order on Lily's behalf on the 6th day. The blood work came back on the 8th day. There was a benzodiazepine in my system, low level, consistent with chronic low-dose exposure over time, not a single acute incident. The teabag sample tested positive for the same compound. Dr. Harmon submitted her findings directly to Patricia and, at Patricia's direction, to the police. Sandra called me on the 9th day. She had a light, casual voice, asking how things were going, whether Lily was being difficult, whether I had remembered to give her the tea because she really did not sleep without it. I said everything was fine. I said Lily was no trouble at all. I said I had been giving her the tea every night. I had not been giving her any such thing, but I needed Sandra not to feel the ground moving under her feet before the authorities were ready. On the 11th day, 2 detectives came to my house. I had known they were coming. Lily and I had talked about it the night before, sitting on the back porch under the pecan tree while the evening cooled around us. I told her that some people were coming to help us, and that she might need to speak to them, and that no one was going to force her to say anything she was not ready to say. She was quiet for a while. Then she picked up the notepad she carried with her everywhere. Now it had become a kind of bridge between us, and she wrote, "What if they don't believe me? Then we show them what we have," I said. "We have the tea bags, we have the photograph, we have the blood work, we have Dr. Harmon, we have Patricia, and we have each other." She thought about that. Then she wrote, "That's a lot." "Yes," I said, "it is." She spoke to the detectives. Not in writing, she spoke out loud, for the first time in front of strangers, in a voice that was quiet but entirely clear. She told them what she had seen. She told them about the pill bottle. She told them about the phone calls she had listened to through walls. She told them the dates she remembered, which were specific and accurate, because Lily had been keeping track in a small composition notebook hidden in a false bottom of her backpack that I had not even known about. I watched the detectives' faces when she produced that notebook. They were professionals. They kept their expressions neutral, but I saw the look that passed between them, and I understood what it meant. Sandra and Derek flew back from Seattle on a Thursday evening. Patricia had told me they would be met at the airport. I did not watch the news that night. I sat on the back porch with Lily, and we shared a bowl of popcorn, and I read to her from a library book she had chosen herself, a book about a girl who builds a boat and sails it across a lake to find something she had lost. When I finished the last page, Lily sat quietly for a moment. Then she said out loud, in that careful, quiet voice, "Read it again?" Those were the first words she had ever spoken to me directly. Not written, spoken. I held it together, just barely. "Yes," I said, "as many times as you want." The months that followed were not easy, and I will not pretend otherwise. There were court dates and depositions and a custody hearing that stretched across multiple sessions. There were moments when the legal system moved slowly enough that my patience wore thin and my faith wore thinner. There were people who questioned things. Why hadn't I noticed sooner? Why hadn't I pushed harder years ago? And I did not have perfect answers to those questions, because they were the same ones I asked myself in the darkest hours of the night. But Patricia was thorough. The evidence was solid, and Lily, when it was her turn to speak in the evaluation sessions, spoke with a clarity that no professional could dismiss. The diagnosis Sandra had built her case around: the global developmental delay, the processing disorder, the years of documented dysfunction, was reviewed by 3 independent pediatric specialists. Their conclusion, delivered in careful clinical language, amounted to this: there was no evidence of any developmental impairment. There was extensive evidence of emotional suppression, chronic anxiety, and trauma response consistent with prolonged psychological control. The child had not been unable to learn. The child had been prevented from learning. Sandra's attorney tried several angles. He tried to paint Lily's testimony as coached. He tried to suggest the blood work could be explained by a medication I was already taking. He tried to argue that the photograph was of a bottle of my own prescription, not something introduced into the household. Patricia dismantled all of it, piece by piece, with the particular quiet efficiency of a woman who had been doing this work for 30 years and had very little patience for dishonesty dressed up in paperwork. I was granted legal guardianship of Lily on a Wednesday morning in January, 4 months after that September, when Sandra and Derek had left her on my porch with a bag of poisoned tea bags and a sticky note with instructions. I remember driving home from the courthouse with Lily in the passenger seat. It was cold, one of those flat, gray Tennessee winter mornings that feels like the sky is thinking about something. Lily had her hands folded in her lap, and she was looking out the window at the bare trees going past. "Are you all right?" I asked her. She considered the question seriously, the way she considered everything. Then she said, "I think so." "Are you?" "I think so," I said. She was quiet for another mile. Then, "What happens now?" "Now," I said, "we figure out what you like, what you're good at, what you want to learn." She turned to look at me. There was something in her face that I can only describe as the expression of a person who has been holding their breath for a very long time and has just been told, for the first time that they believe it, that they are allowed to exhale. "Everything," she said. "I want to learn everything." I had to look back at the road so she would not see me cry, but I was smiling when I did it. There is a particular thing that people say when they hear this story, and I understand why they say it. They say, "How did you know? How did you know to trust her, to act, to push?" And the honest answer is that I did not know, not with certainty, not at the beginning. What I had was a grandmother's instinct that had been telling me for years that the child I was looking at was not the child I was being shown. What I had was a 9-year-old girl who had held herself together for 15 months on nothing but the hope that one day she would be in a room with someone who would look at her like she was real. What I had was the sense that when that moment came, it was my job not to waste it. Lily is enrolled in school now. She started in February, mid-year, which is not ideal for anyone, but she walked into that building on her first day with her chin up and her backpack on her shoulders, and she did not look back at me, not once. I drove home and sat in the parking lot of the grocery store for 20 minutes before I trusted myself to go inside without embarrassing myself in front of strangers. Her teacher called me at the end of the first week to tell me that Lily was reading 2 grade levels above her peers and had correctly answered every question in a science lesson on ecosystems, including one that the teacher admitted she had expected no 5th grader to get. She asked me 3 follow-up questions, the teacher said, with a kind of delighted bewilderment in her voice. Good ones. Yes, I said. She does that. We sit on the back porch some evenings still, under Raymond's pecan tree, and Lily does her homework while I read or just sit and watch the light change over the yard. She talks more freely now. She talks a great deal, actually, when she is comfortable, making up for lost time with a quiet intensity that I find I could listen to for hours. She has opinions about things. She has questions about everything. She has a laugh that I did not know existed until February, a surprised, full laugh that she seems almost startled by herself each time it escapes her. She asked me once, on an evening in early spring, whether I was angry. At who? I said. She did not answer immediately. She was working through the question carefully, the way she did. At everyone, she said finally. At the situation. At however many years. I thought about it honestly. Sometimes, I said. But I find that the anger takes up space I'd rather give to something else. Like what? I looked at her, this child who had walked into my house carrying a secret that could have broken her, who had made a calculated, courageous decision to trust me with it, who was now sitting across from me working on a math worksheet with her sneakers untied and a smear of pen ink on her left wrist. Like this, I said. Right here. She nodded slowly. Then she went back to her worksheet. After a moment she said, without looking up, Me too. I want to say one more thing, because I have heard from other grandmothers in the grocery store, at church, in the comments on this channel who have told me that they have felt something similar. A sense that a child they love is not quite who they are being told that child is, a worry they cannot fully name, a question they are afraid to ask too loudly, because the asking might cost them access, might cause a rift, might make them the difficult one in the family. If that is you, I want to say this plainly, trust it. Do not wait for certainty. Do not wait until you have a photograph in your hand and blood work in your doctor's file. Pay attention to the child, not just the story you are being told about the child. Ask the extra question. Notice the extra look. And if a small person puts their hand in yours and takes a breath like they have been waiting a long time for exactly this moment, be the person who is ready for that moment when it comes. That is all it was, in the end. I was in the right place, and I stayed present enough to notice. And my granddaughter, who they said could not learn, taught me more in 2 weeks than I had learned in years.